afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're still awake after the lunch. If not, I will try to keep you awake. What I will do today is to talk about our critical infrastructure and how to protect this. So I will do a closer look at the protection of data centers and also mention some space assets, as mentioned in the introduction. My name, as introduced, is Streefland. I'm the CEO of Secior, and Secior is a company, a Dutch company, that is basically focusing on helping the critical infrastructure becoming more cyber resilient. So we're helping data centers, hospitals, manufacturing companies to become cyber resilient. And of course, as any other cybersecurity presentation, I will start with some horror stories. No, I won't do it. I will mention some, but hopefully the most part of my presentation is positive. That's what I want at least to address to you guys. But I start with a horror story, and perhaps you recognize this. This is was the data center of OVH in France, which was burned down by a fire, as you can see on the newspapers. This happened in 2021. And for people who are familiar with this data center, yes, it was an old data center, but I can tell you this was not an accident. And I don't want to scare you here, but I got serious indications that this was done on purpose. And I will explain that later on during my presentation, how this happened. But as you look at the newspapers, and yes, I will talk a little bit about the horror stories, you see things like this popping up in the newspapers. And on top of that, you also see that it becomes uninsurable cybersecurity, cyber risks. So these are the stories that you always hear when somebody's talking about cybersecurity, the worst thing, how things can go bad. And yes, Houston, we might have a problem. It is the fact. But what's the issue now for us? What's the issue in the critical infrastructure? The critical infrastructure that I'm talking about is most of the time for you guys here, can you see as data centers? Because they are officially announced as being critical infrastructure in Europe, which means they have to comply to the NIS2 directive, as already briefed yesterday by Michiel and by the other person. So the NIS2 directive is a European legislation or a directive which will be translated to national legislation, in which it's stated what critical infrastructure organizations must do to become cyber resilient. The only article that you have to remember from the NIS2 is Article 21. Keep that in mind, Article 21. Talking enough about the NIS2 directive, because that's boring and I have to keep you awake, so let's talk about what's the issue. Well, the issue is the fact that all the critical infrastructure organizations have a lot of OT, operational technology, also industrial control systems. And the problem is not the OT, although it is, but it's more the OT-IT convergence. Since 10, 15 years, the OT devices, the OT systems are now connected to the IT network, to the internet. And they are not made for that. So let me explain it later on. But what is OT? And in order to explain what is OT, I have a definition here, which is from the National Institute for Standard and Technologies, or Science and Standards. And it says that OT describes a family of systems used to manage, monitor, and control industrial operations, focusing on the physical devices and processes they use. And again, you can see them in data centers, in water, pharmaceutical industries, manufacturing industries, those kind of systems. And those systems look like little computers, PLCs, programmable logic controllers, that might say something, remote terminal units, same thing. But the thing is that OT systems are specialized computers. They use specialized protocols and networks that interact with the physical environment, and that makes critical infrastructure critical. So the fact is that these OT systems, and yes, you have a lot of those OT systems in your data centers, are the main thing of why this is an issue. Why is it an issue? Because these things, as I already mentioned, are not made with security by design. These systems are made for doing their stuff for 20, 30 years in a row. Systems were developed in the 70s and 80s of the last century, about the age that I am and that this t-shirt comes from. That's how it started. And these systems were manufactured for continuity, for reliability and robustness. They had to work in industrial environments. And that's the reason why these systems were not made for connecting them to the internet. And yes, it is nice, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, to have on your iPad what's happening in the factory, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's risky. Because most of those systems, they have a default password. When a system of ABB or Siemens or Honeywell or Schneider Electric or Amazon or whatever is installed in your environment, most of the times it comes along with a default password. And most of the times they say, oh, it's not connected to the internet. Don't worry, it's in standalone. Nothing, ladies and gentlemen, nothing isn't connected to the internet anymore. Everything is interconnected. We had an example about 13 years ago in Iran, where they had a nuclear facility in Natanz, which was completely isolated from the internet or whatsoever. 2010. But still, some malware came in, and this factory or this nuclear facility, they ruined the centrifuges. Because they implemented, with a USB stick, they implemented malware. Stuxnet is called. And that was the first attack on OT systems. So, please, if you ever hear, no, this OT system is not connected to the internet, everything is connected to the internet. You can think about it. If you're, or the person that comes to maintain the Siemens device, or Schneider Electric, whatever, and they come up with their laptop and they plug in the laptop with a cable to that system. There you go. Who knows what's on his laptop or her laptop? So you see that these devices, these OT devices, are special. And you have to take special consideration on securing those devices. The problem is that we have a lack of visibility. If I ask you, how many OT devices are connected to your network? I don't think anybody has the good answer. Well, probably around 10, 15, 20, I don't know. The same applies to IoT devices. All the IoT sensors that are in your network, in your data center, and there are a lot. They're all connected to your network. So the lack of visibility, mainly OT systems. Because sometimes an OT system is maintained by the vendor, by Siemens, by ABB, by Honeywell, and you don't know what's going on. That's a possibility. But it is a fact of lack of visibility. And the thing is, with cybersecurity, you can't protect what you can't see. So you have to ask yourself, how many devices do I have? How many servers do I have? How many IoT devices do I have? How many PDUs are in my racks? You don't look at the racks themselves, at the data or the servers of your customers, but you look at your own systems. So how many security cameras are connected to my network? Might be interesting. So you need to know what you have. That is my first takeaway. Do know what you have. Make a complete asset inventory. You need to do that. Because otherwise you have blind spots. And guess what? Hackers love blind spots. That's what it is. So let me give you an example. I give you two examples of a data center. So let's talk about data centers. If we look at a data center and we look like this, we can see that in a data center there are many more OT devices than IT devices. You wouldn't expect it, but that's the way it is. So a data center, as you can see, everything in red is identified as operational technology. The chillers, the racks, the UPSs, the generator devices, the PLCs, etc., etc. You guys have a lot of OT stuff in your data center. And yes, you have also IoT equipment, cameras, security control, rack locks. And you also have IT, because most of the data centers, they have a DSIM, a NOC, that is monitoring all those OT equipment. But they are monitoring them not on security, they're monitoring them on functionality, which is obvious. But that's basically the attack surface for hackers. And I can tell you a story that a hacker got in a casino in Vegas via the temperature sensor in the aquarium. Serious story. So any IP asset that has a connection to the internet, and we now know they all have a connection to the internet, is vulnerable. Mikko Hipponen, a Finnish cybersecurity guru, once said, if it's smart, it's vulnerable. He wrote a book about it. And that's true. Everything is hackable and vulnerable. So keep that in mind. If we now look at this data center, let's take a look at the first scenario that I have. Think about the French OVH data center. We're going to look at the UPS systems of a data center. Because what happened is that this came into the news some year ago, I think, in 2022. Researchers discover critical vulnerabilities in APS smart UPS devices. And these were the critical vulnerabilities. And a critical vulnerability means basically an open door for a hacker. That is a critical vulnerability. And you can see there are 3 different critical vulnerabilities found in UPS systems. And what happened is that researchers, they said, okay, let's see how we can exploit those vulnerabilities. Which they did, and they were successful. If we now go back to the OVH data center, the owner of the OVH data center, against whom there are now 140 lawsuits, he's mentioned that the fire started in the UPS. That is a given. That's what he also claimed. The fire started in the UPS. And he said because of an update. Okay. Anyway, but then still, as you guys know, that in a UPS space, what do you have there in order to protect it from burning down? You have a lot of blussing. What happened, and that's the information I got, is that this blussing was also touched by the hackers and they switched it off. So there was no alarm going off that there was smoke coming out of the UPSs. And there you got it. And then it goes fast. So this is just an example of possibilities. Another example is, I call it the cooling attack. So as an ethical hacker or as a hacker, you can see which systems have connection to the internet. Which system can I touch, can I enter straight from the internet? And in a lot of cooling devices, no matter which brand they are, if they are Eaton, if they are Siemens, if they are Schneider Electric, doesn't matter, they have a PCO web network card made by Carel. Probably you guys also have them in your network. And this PCO network card is used to have interoperability between systems. And it's talking with the BACnet protocol, which is a pretty simple protocol. The thing is that you can search with a search machine which is called Shodan, which is a search machine where you can search devices on the internet. A lot of researchers use this, hackers too. You can search this engine for this PCO web card. And then you find 343 results. In this case, again, we don't have anything against France, but here again we saw a data center in France. There was a PCO web network card that was connected to the internet without any firewall in between. It was connected to the internet. So, what we did, we tried to get access to this network card. But we need to know the username and password. Well, the username is admin. As we know, default passwords. Admin is the username, but then the password. So we can do brute force, but perhaps there's a brute force protection on it. So what we've done, we just looked it up on the internet, and Karel is posting their passwords on the internet. Great, guys. It's true, seriously. So what happened is that we filled in the passwords that were given by their own website. We filled in this, and within an hour, seriously, within an hour, I was the system administrator, the web administrator, the PLC user, and the guest user of their cooling devices. And I tried to do this in the Netherlands, and it worked. It worked. I won't mention which data center it is, but it worked. So I could then switch off or heat up the cooling until 80 degrees Celsius. And guess what happens? Your data center is gone. Anyway, enough about data centers. Space assets. Another thing. You might think, well, space assets, they are secure. They are far out there in space and you cannot touch them. Well, the same thing applies. Space assets are OT equipment. They have a lot of stuff there, but they're never made for cybersecurity. They're made to do something in space. And something in space means they have to be robust, they have to be light, they can be pressured because they have to got a lot of stuff that's coming their way. So they have certain capabilities, but not cybersecurity is not one of them. And it wasn't until 2016 that the data communication from a satellite until a ground station was encrypted. It was clear text, ladies and gentlemen, until 2016. They are still flying a lot of satellites around with still communicating clear text to their ground stations. But space assets are easy to hack. Why are they easy to hack? Because they're also built to do their things in space, not for cybersecurity. But they're also now connected to the internet. I mean, they are part of the internet, satellite communication. So I have a question to keep you awake. What is this number? More than 8,261. Anybody? What does that number tell you? Satellites in space, exactly. There are different numbers, but this is the official number from last year. So this year probably there are more. This number, 31. What is this number? Anybody? Amount of ground stations? No. Yeah, it's a good thought. The number of GPS satellites. 31. And this number, 25%, is the percentage that you need to hack GPS systems, and then all the air traffic in the world doesn't fly anymore. So basically, if we hack 7 GPS satellites, there's no plane taking off in the world. That is what critical infrastructure is. That's scary, isn't it? It's scary. Luckily, the GPS satellites are okay protected. But in overall, if you take a look at a space asset, this is a generic overview of a space asset, of a satellite. And what you can see with the red stars is that all those systems are hackable. Why? Because this thing is built in a very simplistic way. They have a satellite bus, which is basically the connectivity hub in a satellite. And everything is in this flat network connected to each other. And there's not one element that is two-factor authentication required, that is encrypted. It is simple. So satellites are very easy to hack, unfortunately. Enough about the war stories and the horror stories. Let's talk now about the positive side. Because I started this presentation with how to protect critical infrastructure. And I didn't want to scare you. I just wanted to make you aware. So let's talk about the positive story. And yes, Houston, we have a solution. There is a solution. Let me explain this. Because the solution lies in the fact that you need visibility. Again, you can't protect what you don't see. Start with visibility. If you see things, you can do something about it. If you see that you have a lot of vulnerabilities in your network, you can do something about it. If you see an anomaly, if you see something happening that you don't trust, you can do something about it. If you don't see it, you cannot do anything about it. So visibility is key. And I believe that visibility can be achieved by continuous monitoring. That's what it is. We need to monitor. We need to monitor the North Sea because of the submarine cables that are there. It was lately in the news. The Russians having boats, scanning, but we need to have visibility. Coming back to data centers and our security, our critical infrastructure, we need continuous monitoring of what's happening in a data center. So, for example, if a temperature sensor is being replaced, please make sure that the replacement is configured in a secure way, that it doesn't open the gate to internet. You need to know what's going on. If things are changing, you need to know. So you need to do an asset inventory, which is also mandatory by the NIS2 directive, by the way. A network visualization and a vulnerabilities overview. That's what you need to do, plus alerts. And what we do with our Managed Security Operations Center, we do just this. We are monitoring not only the IT, like all the others are doing, Fox IT, Northwave, ESET, Orange Cyber Defense, you name them. They all monitor your IT network, but they don't look at OT or IoT. And that's exactly important for you guys, for the data centers. You want to monitor your OT and IoT, and of course also your IT. So, coming back to a data center again, we've done this for a data center. I call it Data Center X. And what we've done, we placed a passive sensor in their network and we let it listening for 4 weeks. And after these 4 weeks, or before the 4 weeks started, we asked the owner of this data center, how many assets do you think are linked to your network? And he mentioned, well, about 300, 400. As you can see, we found 1124. We found everything. We found PDUs. So you can also see how many racks there are. Computers, cameras, VoIP phones, etc., etc. Which vendors? APC, which is Schneider Electric. They had the cameras from Dahua, Cisco, a lot of equipment here. And you can see all the firmware versions and the Windows versions. And yes, we saw Windows XP, we saw Windows NT4, we saw servers 2017, whatever. We saw a lot of old stuff. What we also saw is that some of their OT equipment, Schneider Electric here, that the firmware was version 3.5, while they should have had 3.6, because that was since November 2019, 4 years ago, has not been updated. That's a big thing. An OT device, which is a big thing. We also saw some communication going to China, which he was not aware of. So we see everything, visibility, visibility, visibility. And we saw also possible vulnerabilities. This data center had more than 70,000 possible vulnerabilities. But if we take a better look at it, and you take a likelihood of 0.8, then you have still about 590 vulnerabilities. Couple of hundred vulnerabilities that you have to do something about it. Which is good. I mean, first of all, the compliments for this data center owner, because he likes to know. He said, I don't know how many assets I have. I don't know how many vulnerabilities I have, but I want to know in order to do something about it. And that's what it is. We are not there to show, to blame this person. No, we are there to help. And we do that with our health check. And finally, that's how we monitor. We get alerts. We get alerts. Of course, we are monitoring this 24/7, but we get alerts from the system of what's going on. And with those alerts, and we even saw log4shell still, we saw 3 times a log4shell in their systems, which you don't want, because they are exploited. So that's what we do. And that's what you should do. Get that health check. Let us scan your data center. 4 weeks and you know everything. That's what it is. But then, the final point I want to make is that a lot of people say, yeah, I don't need monitoring. We have a pen test. We let a pen test company doing a pen test every year. Sometimes the insurance company demands that they have to do a pen test, which is good. I mean, a pen test is good. But keep in mind that a pen test is only a moment in time. It is only a snapshot. The next day, when the pen test is done, you might have new vulnerabilities popping up again. So a pen test is only a moment in time. And a pen test is only a limited scope. You look at a certain system. Why? To see if the vulnerabilities that you have detected by a vulnerability scanner or whatsoever, that they can be exploited. That is a pen test. So again, don't get me wrong, a pen test is good, but monitoring is much better. And to take to show you the difference, these are the difference between a penetration test and a vulnerability scan. Sometimes they go hand in hand. By the way, the vulnerability scan is only scanning IT. It doesn't look at OT. A pen test is also most of the time IT focused, because you don't want to pen test OT equipment. That is pretty scary. You can, but you have to be careful. So it requires different capabilities. Anyway, but you see also here the difference between pen test, vulnerability scanning and security monitoring. You need to do monitoring. That is what it is. Which brings me to my conclusion. And the thing is that, yes, I believe that successful protection is possible. But again, visibility is the key. I don't say it's the silver bullet, but you will cover your ass. I can tell you that. And also, I believe that cyber resilience, and cyber resilience is cybersecurity plus incident response, that is cyber resilience, can only be achieved with full visibility. Then you know what's going on. And yes, if you get a breach or somebody makes a mistake, can also happen, you see it instantly. And you can act instantly, and you can limit the damage. So that's a very important thing. Full visibility. Please, people, go for it. Full visibility. I don't like blind spots. I'm a former CISO of LeaseWeb. I don't like blind spots. Because, again, people that know they're blind, that know to abuse the blind spots are out there. And again, people make mistakes too. Full visibility means complete infrastructure visibility, which means also OT and IoT. You want to know your OT and IoT equipment, especially in the data center, and not only the IT domain. And finally, continuous monitoring of this complete attack surface is required to detect anomalies and changes in the infrastructure whenever they occur. And not only one time during a pen test or vulnerability scan, but continuously. With that, I want to thank you very much for your attention. If there are any questions, let me know. I'm here the rest of the afternoon. And think about your own attack surface. ask your security officer about this. Probably he or she doesn't have an answer on their OT and IoT cybersecurity, but thank you very much.
So do we have any questions at all? I do have one. So when you were explaining the data center and you showed about 70,000 vulnerabilities.
Possible vulnerabilities.
Okay, what's the realistic number you can get this down to? I mean, okay, you're going to tell me you want 0, of course, but I mean, there must be a balance between cost and
absolutely.
Incident.
It's not about bringing down those vulnerabilities to 0, because that's a hard thing. Mm-hmm. Because every day new vulnerabilities pop up. Vendors come up with, hey, we detected a new vulnerability in our system. So, but you want to know your vulnerabilities. So either you can mitigate them, or you can accept them. Yeah. Perhaps you say, hey, this vulnerability doesn't pose a big risk. I leave it the way it is. Right. But you want to know them. And that's the most important thing.
Cool, clear. Okay, and then the other one is, I had a VIC-20 with a cassette drive. Did your 64 have a 5 1/4 or a cassette drive?
Mine had a floppy, the 5 1/4, yeah.
Okay, so you were very advanced. Okay, that's it then. I think, you'll be around if there's any more questions or you want to make use of Secior?
Secior? Yeah.
Secior services. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.